Welcome back, everybody. Are we blowing out your eardrums? We're getting any audio, everybody? Oh, are we blowing out your eardrums? All right, well, we've got another exciting full panel tonight. So I'm just going to go through them one by one because we have a new member that's working fully know the ropes. So, all right, well, we've got back with us again exciting full Ardenon Studios. Tonight. Say hi to the folks, AA. So I'm just going to go through them one by one because we have a Cedar Saracens working fully know the ropes. So, all right, well, we've got back with us again exciting full Ardenon Studios. Say hi to the folks in the background. So I'm just going to
Howdy, y'all.
Hey gang, how you doing, Chad?
We have a Cedar Saracens back for the first time is something that might be familiar to Geek. We've got back with us again. Exciting full Parker Studios. Say hi to the voice in the background. So I'm
Good evening, y'all.
Oh, and apparently we're having double audio. Well, that's probably just going to have to sort itself out. Because I've got all the settings the same.
We'll just wait for the ether drift to take care of it, right?
Yeah, basically.
Machine gods are on our side, maybe.
Yeah, I'm hearing the Discord fine.
Same.
Oh, there we go. It fixed itself. So, yeah, I mean that's just a trend where for some reason some ghost in the machine is creating audio issues for the first little bit of the show and it goes away. But it's gone now, so we don't have to worry about that.
Let's see, who do we have in chat? Raul, good to see you again. Bradford Walker, good to see you again. Fred Richards, good to see you. We got quite the crowd today. Simon Hogwood. Aha! El Berzadente! Haha! Grüß Gott, mein Freund. Haven't seen him in chat before, but good to have you here, my friend.
Oh, man. And even though the audio issues only lasted like 30 seconds, they cut our viewership by more than half. So I think that we keep attracting new people who then hear that and run away. But that's good. We don't need them. We don't need the fair weather friends, do we?
No, we have El Presidente.
Yeah. Well, and Fiona Wolf is in here too. She signed in really early.
Oh yeah, I know she was absent last night, but making up for lost time now. So hi to everyone in chat. Thanks for joining us. We're gonna get into some more Final Fantasy Tactics, just to bring up speed on the game. Last time we met Mustadio from the engineer class, the first handgun wielder in the game, opening an exciting new chapter in weaponry. And he's being pursued by the criminal Bart Trading Company for reasons as yet unknown, and we are now seeking the assistance of Cardinal Draclau, a hero from the previous war. I think I covered everything. So without further ado, let's get into that. Oh wait, hold on, before I do that, another challenger has entered the ring. Say hi, I'm Breb.
Hello.
Glad to have you back. So question for the live chat on YouTube, can you guys hear the game audio okay? Because I can barely hear it. Might turn that up a little. Let's see. I don't think I finished leveling up everybody from last time. Wonder if I've got some JP to spend. Nothing new and exciting available under Archer yet. I'll hold off on Thief. And I don't think I can get any Samurai Swords yet. She's saving up for Equipped Sword. What about Agrius? What about our girl here? Yeah, grab that. Defend is always handy. I made this guy Time Mage because he's on the path to being our second calculator. So we can blow ourselves and the enemy up even faster, twice as fast. Yeah, I already mastered Summoner for most characters, but Summoner's the oddball, and that even when you buy every skill under it, it doesn't give you the Master Star. If you did the 99.99 JP glitch. So, well. Just doesn't have that cheap skin. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, it's been a while since I've played, so do you need Ultima to master?
There are a couple ways to do that. Like, I think you can learn it from the Ragnarok Sword or from having it cast on you in the Deep Dungeon. I gotta look that up. That's a good question.
It's just bringing back a lot of memories. Just watching this.
Good. I didn't know that you were a fan of this game, Pulp Archivist, so it's nice to have you around.
I played a lot in college. I didn't really advance the plot, but I did enjoy playing the maps.
Oh. Well, we're definitely going to be advancing the plot. What say you, panel? I know this is new to a lot of you guys. How have you found this game so far?
It has a very old school charm and a lot of old games that you don't see in the modern gaming industry. So it's been refreshing.
Absolutely concur.
I think I'm going to turn the audio back down a little bit. Good.
Actually, Pulp Archivist. So I've been a fan of yours for a while. So I wanted to ask a question. So I hear you always hear this bandied about, right? Whenever people talk about any form of popular media, well, what's the old mantra? Like 70% of everything sucks, right?
I think we're talking
90.
90% of everything sucks, right? I remember hearing from a friend of mine, and of course, a lot of this is just a personal taste thing, I imagine. But I'm curious what you have to say about this. He told me he read through a lot of the old obscure pulps too, like the ones that you don't hear about nowadays, like not the Edgar Rice Burroughs or Merritt or what have you, but just like the pot boiler pulps that no one really remembers today, right? And he says that the whole idea that 90% of everything is crap, he hasn't found it yet. Like everything that he read, the obscure kind of dime novel stuff about trains or airplanes or what have you, he said they're all at the very least fine to decent.
That's been my experience. Argosy must have had all the 20%. Sorry, the audio causes me to trip up a little bit more. But Argosy must have had the 20%. And hold on, let me take care of something. Okay, that's better. Yeah. So Argosy was is pretty good. Black Mask, pretty good. I think Sturgeon was saying 80% was crap because the one area that I found that had a quality issue was science fiction, and there is a reason for that. Part of the reason for it goes back to Hugo Gernsback. Now, what Hugo did, he made the first science fiction pulp, so he made the first genre pulp of it. But when he did, he did two things on the financial side. So he paid amateur rates, and he paid late, if at all. So if you were going to write science fiction, you had a lot of people that were doing bestsellers, like let's say Michael Crichton type bestsellers in science fiction, but the equivalent back then. But they'd go to Black Mask, they'd go to Argosy, they'd go to the people that paid them the professional rates that they deserved. So science fiction in the 1930s was getting amateurs, was getting people who were just starting writing, getting people who weren't aware that Hugo was going to pay him late. So it wasn't attracting the same caliber of writers as Weird Tales or Black Mask, Argosy. So it suffered because of that. It took them about a good decade to bring, to bring the writing up to standard. But at the same time, it took them longer to kind of develop. By that time, the tropes were developed. The expectations of the audience were lowered to the point where you had good writers not writing well because that's what was expected. So 80-20, a lot of people, as I said, Sturgeon, I think Sturgeon came up with it because he was in science fiction. If he was in fantasy, if he was in the heroes, or if he was in the adventure pulps, he might have had a different number.
So you would say that the popular conception nowadays of pulp as like cheap potboiler thrillers is unfair. Would you, or?
Yeah, because if you're talking like cheap potboilers as like noir, and we know that art form that came out noir basically came out Black Mask as the pulps. So there's kind of a little bit of that. But if you're talking about low quality, if you're talking barely above fan fiction, sensationalist writing, that's well exaggerated.
Okay, I was gonna say I should have rephrased it to say the characterization of pulps as low quality would be unfair. That's what I meant instead of like because you can have a cheap potboiler thriller, right? It does what it does, and if you write it well, it's still good, right?
Yeah.
You can have like a short story that's still good. But that's not the characterization of pulps. The characterization of pulps nowadays is that they're all of, like 90% of them, whatever Sturgeon's Law says, they're like low quality stories just kind of churned out for pennies on the dollar.
Well, pennies on the dollar was the professional rate. Yeah. I mean, the bizarre thing to me is to see that technical writers are being paid 20, 25, even 40 cents a word right now, and fiction writer professional rates are maybe a third of that. But that's an aside. The only thing cheap about the pulps was the paper that it was written on, and that's where pulp got its name, from the cheap paper that it was turned out on. Sometimes the actual magazines were pretty fly-by-night, but the quality of not even the quality of what survived. The quality was pretty high, much more literate than what you'd expect. What everybody claims to be the Hemingway style, for instance, that it's been so popular for about a century now, wasn't from Hemingway. it was from Black Mask. It was from specifically came out in the 1920s and 1930s, run at Black Mask. I'd have to look up the exact editor who did it, but at the same time Weird Tales had Farnsworth Wright, Black Mask had an editorial team that was just as distinctive and just as prestigious in the long run, and just as far as, and just as important in shaping the not only the genre, not only the magazine, but literature as a whole. Without even realizing, a lot of these guys were just trying to sell their paper, but the impact was well above their weight class.
It's interesting how often that happens. So, I'm curious now, and I apologize if I'm dominating the conversation. Anyone else, feel free to jump in with anything. But I'm intensely curious now to hear your perspective. So you mentioned Argosy, you mentioned Black Mask, all these other publications in a crowded field, given that pulp is at its height during this time. How is it that Gernsback, Hugo Gernsback was astounding, amazing science stories, or
amazing
publication? Amazing. How is it that he came today to be synonymous with, short story science fiction?
Well, if you're the first, but that's not exactly fair, because what he did truly was he was the first person to package it into its own book. And one of the things that I noticed when I was reading through the pulps is there's not science fiction, there's science fictions, plural. Black Mask had a different flavor. Black Mask, even though we know it more for Dashiell Hammett, for the the hard-boiled detective thrillers, it ran science fiction. Argosy ran science fiction. Amazing looked at the popularity of what was going on in these other magazines, and hey, maybe we should have a book dedicated to that. Now, Gernsback also had a second string to his bow. He wasn't just trying to sell magazines. He was also trying to sell fan clubs. He was involved in electronics and radio. What he would try to do is he'd try to sell radio clubs. And he was trying to move that into science fiction. So with Gernsback, it's also the rise of fandom at the same time. The beginning stages of it. Gernsback, as far as an editor, was the first. However, his idea of science fiction was completely different from how it developed after that. I reviewed what he called the Electric Duel, and it's not really good, to be honest. And it's one of the stories he wrote. And there's a bit of a gee whiz thing. About the time, at the time, the Heidelberg dueling in Germany, where college students would duel to get those handsome scars, it was still present, on its way out, but it was still there. He ended up replacing the duels with high voltage electrical batons, basically. So like those pugil sticks, except they're electrified with enough volts to make people disappear once they hit. Mm-hmm. But that was it. That was the gimmick. It was gimmick writing. G is in science cool, and science is pretty interesting, but there wasn't anything narrative to hook it on. Gernsback's idea of good science fiction drifted more to CSI and Mythbusters. Now, that obviously isn't the way science fiction developed. Part of that is Astounding. Astounding is important in science fiction, not not just for John Campbell, but it was the first science fiction magazine to pay professional rates. And from that part, that's where it started getting a lot of its prestige, because it paid well and it paid on time. Things that weren't being done in any magazine Gernsback was in charge of, and sadly to say, also in Weird Tales, and kind of leading to Howard's demise. So Gernsback gets it because he was first, but the field rapidly moved past him because they didn't want CSI. They were kind of getting into some of the stuff I've been working on writing towards lately. English language science fiction has a sort of uncomfortableness to it that traces back to H.G. Wells. H.G. Wells did a wonderful job with the speculation. So the classic hard science fiction of let's take an initial set of assumptions and let's speculate way out into the unknown what the consequences will be from that. So, but he also had a little bit of a social take that he always threw in. So since Wells was so popular, it wasn't enough for a lot of readers, definitely for fans, to just have it in a futuristic setting. You had to have the speculation. You had, and then when a lot of Campbell's writers got into it, you had to have that social aspect into it, and those things shaped the field more than Gernsback did. Although such things as Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers of America's Predators and Editors column, that's a little bit of a response to to why I see this true legacy of Gernsback in science fiction is cheating your authors.
Ben Wheeler has a question in the chat. He says, "What do you mean by uncomfortableness when you say that?"
Well, for instance, if you C.S. Lewis in one of his books recorded an interview with a couple other English science fiction authors, and they're starting to debate science fiction. And one of the things that he was uncomfortable with was taking a mystery story or a romance and just bringing it into a futuristic setting. To him, that wasn't science fiction, and it's that kind of uncomfortableness with the idea of science fiction as just a setting without the speculation, without the social message that I'm talking about. If you look at French science fiction, it's an aesthetic. It's a setting. It's an aesthetic. It's not rooted in a system, the speculative system, the way that English science fiction is. German, Japanese science fiction. A lot of them take influences from English science fiction, but at the same time, they're taking their native stories, their romances, their mysteries, and pushing it into a future setting. They're not sometimes they do speculative work, but it isn't where it's demanded. And if their science fiction can be anything from the 5 seconds into the future to 5 eons from now, what it would be. There isn't necessarily that speculative element that is almost demanded in English science fiction, English language science fiction.
Okay. Thank you for that. That was very enlightening.
Okay, I just wanted to say hi to Catholic Lancer, who joined us a bit ago. What's up, CL? Are you with us? You may have gone to get a snack or something. That's okay. I want to give a shout out
apologies for that.
in chat to Bradford Walker, to Escape Velocity, Ben Wheeler. What else we got? I know we saw some other peeps in here.
Mic check.
Oh, there we are. What's up?
Evening. Lost track of time as I was assembling turnip men together.
You'll have that.
Yep.
I look at you every time. But it's been fascinating listening to the discussion of pulp history so far, so by all means, carry on.
Well, I think if Bradford brought up JD Cowan's posts have been kind of interesting. Just been chewing through part 2 and kind of looking back to that relative to comic books as well, because DC Comics has a lot of people who they harvested from the pulp field because of Mort Weisinger and Julie Schwartz working for the fan magazines as well.
Yeah, that was pretty interesting. The Doc Savage novels that were recently published alongside the Shadow had Will Murray did a lot of interesting introductions to it, and you learn that I think Weisinger was a friend with Lester Dent, and actually was supposed to write one of the Doc Savage ones. So they talked all the time. I found Lester Dent is very popularly known as far as in the writing advice for his master plot.
Right.
So it's a little difficult to necessarily break down. But in one of the interviews, Weisinger broke it down into basically broke down the master plot into a single paragraph. One was actually is pretty awesome. So there's a lot of that going on. The other thing with that is there was a combination of a paper shortage and a change in editorial tastes on top of each other on around 1940, 1941 because of the war, and a lot of the pulp magazines ended up getting chewed up and sent over as ballast for the various war machines in the various theaters. But what ended up happening is a lot of the old pulpsters went into comics from there.
Right.
So you had an exodus because of the editors, but you had all that knowledge going into that field.
But actually, in some respects, you did have it because of the editors, because Weisinger and Schwartz joined up with the elements that would become national publications as editors. But what they were doing prior to that were they were agents for science fiction writers. So Alfred Bester pinged Julie Schwartz to say, "Come on over to All American Comics because I know you. You were my agent."
The other thing going on is that you were starting to get a replacement of editors in the pulps with a lot of university educated newbies that didn't grow up, that weren't writers, didn't grow up in it, had a lot of college ideas on how writing should be. And if thing about writing, especially for the pulps, is your editor's your audience. Your editor buys it, buys from the author, and then he'll sell it. He'll bundle it in the magazine, sell it to that. But your audience is your purchasing editor, And what those purchasing editors did straight out of college was, okay, you don't write like how I was taught you were supposed to write. I'm
Right.
not going to hire you. So a lot of the well-established pulpsters weren't getting work anymore, but they
Right.
were in comics.
Right. Because it's just interesting to see how many people like Otto Binder and Edmund Hamilton and Bester were over at essentially creating comic books, creating superheroes, working on adventure comics, while they were taking that transition from pulps to moving into their, I guess, more full science fiction careers in the late 40s, early 50s.
And honestly, the genre was better for it.
Indeed.
I think something was lost when you could only write in science fiction.
Yeah. If you take a look at just how many things those really handful of authors in the early 40s had touched and created and then moved on to other things, it's pretty amazing.
Well, so here we are after finishing that battle with a little more intrigue. But first, I want to say to the chat, who might not be up to speed on the pulps and their co-option by the Futurians, essentially sci-fi commies, and Campbell, is the discussion that these guys are having right now in the panel explains everything. Everything you see when you look at Hollywood, when you look at Old Pub, when you look at TV, this is where it all started. Because pulp used to rule the world. Like, the Shadow's radio show had a bigger listenership than, like, pretty much any TV show nowadays. Like, it's hard to imagine the cultural force that the pulps exerted back then. And then it just all went away by, like, editorial diktat. But I will let my guest discuss that.
The key thing to remember this is I'm more versed on the business side. J.D. Cohen had one good series and is in the middle of his second series dealing with the fanish side. Unfortunately, science fiction cannot be divorced from the various fanish problems. A lot of it sounds familiar, whether it's canceling the Shaver Mysteries or canceling Dr. Satan because they would not stand for a hero pulp in Weird Tales. So you have a lot of that. The fanish side, the amateur politics that JD is documenting and capturing. I'm a little bit more familiar with the business side. If you want to see the other side, definitely go to his website. I'll try to find a link. Try to find a link for that. But
yeah, definitely recommended. I wish JD was here right now, in fact.
So, Wasteland and Sky, all one word, blogspot.com.
I'll put that in chat.
The Fandom Illustrated link is probably a good one. I'll drop that in the Discord, Brian.
Okay.
Does chat allow links or?
I can.
Okay.
Thank you.
Because all four of the series that JD has done so far, including a new one, are linked in that link.
Actually, so if we're getting people back into the pulp, I'm curious, Pulp Archive. So we've talked a bit about the bigger names that still are remembered today. We of course have Edgar Rice Burroughs. We have Merritt. We have all the Shadow. We have let's see, Conan Barbarian, Solomon Kane, Doc Savage. Are there any how do I phrase this? Is there any like more obscure but still excellent pulp series that you would recommend outside of like the big ones that people still remember today?
Yeah. First one that comes to mind is Tybalt Corday by Theodore Roscoe. So there's a framing story. Best way I could describe this before I go into it, it's kind of a naturalistic weird tales set in a French Legionnaire setting. That's another French. Okay, so the French in the time of the pulps, the French Legionnaires were as popular as magical schools are right now. So and you get a little bit of that bleed through into science fiction, into fantasy, even a little bit into Dune. Although some of that's because the French Legionnaire stories are very similar to the Russian steppe influence that's going into Dune. But so what you have is this story. You're walking through Algeria, and you go to this cafe, and there's this old soldier, this old legionnaire there. He's 80 years old, but his beard is still cinnamon colored. So he's not I mean, he's old, he's seasoned, but he's not elderly. And he sits back and he tells you these stories, and they're soldier stories. They're anything from the time where he was at, he and his buddies were out there trying to retake this post from from I think it was Arabs at the time. It might have been Berbers. Okay, typical desert setting, typical standard enemies, and they didn't have anything to shoot. They didn't have guns. So they've got to find a solution that's better than bullets, or it might be this particular time where it's a real dark tale of revenge about this American who joins the French Legion to get away because his wife left him for a lover. Well, it turns out that as they're going through on this boat in Africa, it turns out that the captain and his wife are this guy's ex-wife and her lover. And in the middle of this, the native army revolts. So while Corday's off trying to get the rescue, relief and rescue from the nearest legion post, this American is using every dirty trick in the book that he can think of to protect his ex-wife from the rebel natives. So you get a lot of that good humor. You get some good humor in it, but you get a lot of, I keep on calling it naturalistic weird tales, because there's a little bit of doubt, but there's a little bit of plausible explanation on a lot of the mysteries that he tells. And as I said, there's always that good but kind of dank humor that comes from veterans. So that would be one of the first ones I'd recommend. If let's see,
How do you spell the name of that series again?
All right, I'll let's see. Tybalt Corday, so THIBAULT and then Corday, and it's by Theodore Roscoe. And I did a review of it at Castalia House. I can throw that into the Discord as well.
Hey, well, that sounds like a lot of fun. I was aware that there was actually some, it was a common story element for the French Foreign Legion to be featured as an element of stories. For example, if you remember the original, or not the original, but the Mummy movie with Brendan Fraser, something I didn't appreciate as a kid was that he was a Legion veteran, which was always interesting. And looking back on it now, it's clear that the Mummy was taking that from that particular genre of the pulps, which is definitely something I appreciate more now than I did as a kid, knowing what I do. Gosh, The Mummy is a really underappreciated movie. It's held up surprisingly well. It is pure fun pulp adventure. It's a lot of fun. I need to rewatch that again soon, I say.
Yeah.
Some great pulp films come out near the end of the millennium. You had The Mummy. You had Darkman, The Rocketeer. Those were a little bit earlier than The Mummy.
Actually, I still haven't seen The Rocketeer. That's the one with the young Jennifer Connelly, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Is the best superhero movie ever made.
Excuse me. Oh, but that's not young Jennifer Connelly, because Jennifer Connelly's been in movies since she was like 12.
Oh.
Yeah, check out Phenomenon by Dario Argento. Super creepy movie. Yeah, really scary.
Well, ladies and gentlemen in the chat, you have a good recommendation for a horror movie with a young Jennifer Connelly, I suppose. There you go. But,
yeah, when I did the Ethereal casting call, just kicking the old peanut around, thinking, okay, if a Soul Cycle series of movies ever got green-lighted, which under the current regime it never will, and I had a time machine, which actor would I cast in all the major roles? I would definitely have to go with Phenomenon era Jennifer Connelly for Elena from Ethereal. That's just.
Or go ahead, sorry.
But that's just me. Man can dream. Man can dream.
Actually, so I was gonna say, since you brought up the idea of film rights, so for anyone in the chat who doesn't know, optioning is what they call it when a film studio or a production house goes to you, and essentially they call it option. They pay you money to more or less hold the rights to adapt your work into a movie or a TV series or what have you. I remember seeing Larry Correa on Twitter. I believe it was Larry Correa. Yeah, he said people option his work to be made into a TV series or what have you. He always just says yes because money's money. He just takes it, and 90% of the time it will never happen anyways. Most of the time, studios will just option your work just to have it so that other people can't make it, and they may get to it, they may not get to it one of these days. So yeah. Would you still, knowing that, would you still say what do you think of, I suppose, that approach to optioning your work, even if we are dealing with demonic death cultists at Netflix and whatnot?
Who are you asking that? I'm sorry, who was that question directed to?
Oh, you specifically, but everyone in the chat can chime in if they have something to contribute.
I'll take a shot at it just from the perspective of comic books. Marvel Comics got itself into the bind it's in right now with Fantastic Four and Spider-Man and some other properties because they were optioning whatever they could back in the mid-90s. So when DC ultimately scooped them up in the 2000s, they had many of these things floating around kind of all over the place. In fact, if you go back to Corman's Fantastic Four from, 94? The only reason that movie was made is to maintain the option for the company.
By the way, super important game moment here. For those of you watching on YouTube, it should be coming up in just a second. But that stone right there that the Cardinal just pulled out, yeah, that's going to be central to the plot. By the way, a few points of in-universe theology in regard to the Crystal Dragon Jeebus religion, which I find rather quaint. So, the Glabados Church is a major religion in Western Evilise. They worship a figure called Saint Ajora, whom earlier in her exchange with the Gate Guards, Agrius here identified as the Son of God. However, in the Final Fantasy canon, Saint Ajora's sex is still up for debate. There is a side quest in Final Fantasy XII in which you run across that legend, and their Ajora is said to be female, and there are events in this game that would reinforce that conclusion. But it's still kind of a bone of contention among the fandom.
The worst thing that Square Enix did about that time was trying to link everything into an Evilise, or linking 7 and 10, and just putting all the unnatural connections that didn't naturally flow from the stories in between all their games.
Yeah, I think their biggest mistake was making a sequel to a game.
Which one, if we're talking about Final Fantasy X?
10-2, yeah.
Well, the Dirge of Cerberus, too.
How many times have you heard the joke, why is it called Final Fantasy if they keep making another one?
There's a reason, but
I mean, I know why it's called Final Fantasy. That story was explained to me, funny enough, as a teenager. I remember actually thinking as a young kid when I first heard of it, and there was like, at that point I heard of it, there was, 8, 9, around that time. I remember thinking, oh wow, that's a long-running game series. I thought it was just one really, really long story as a kid. Didn't even realize that it was all basically entirely separate continuities, or not even continuities, entirely separate worlds, more or less.
the game that series from that time, if you want one long interconnected series, is Dragon Quest. At least the first 3 or 4, if I remember correctly.
First 3, 4 goes off in its own continuity. It's
Thank
still
you.
awesome. No, that's fine. I just played through all of them in like 2019. Good times. Or at least all the original NES ones. I haven't played 5 yet.
And if you want to understand a whole lot about anime right now, it definitely serves you well to play Dragon Quest, the original 3.
Yeah, have you seen that meme going around about Isekai? I was just like, Dragon Quest plus X thing.
Yeah, pretty much. That's...
Yeah, there's yeah.
I'm just
A lot of it-
irritated
it's-
with isekai.
A lot of it. Go ahead.
I'm just irritated that a lot of isekai could just as easily be a fantasy.
Yeah, you
And-
can take out the isekai element and lose nothing.
I maintain that the original isekai is a Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court.
Original isekai is what?
A Connecticut Yankee in King Arthur's court.
It's bringing this back to the pulps. Isekai, at least with Amazing, was a was a big moneymaker for him. And Amazing actually had the highest circulation of all science fiction and fantasy books. And the reason why they did it was to ease the reader from the familiar everyday present, and then take the reader with the main character through the transition into the fantasy world. So the isekai as a mechanic has a purpose. The fact that everybody's copying Dragon Quest light novels in Japan and just iterating on that. And it's a stale genre, but there's usefulness in the technique.
I believe
Yeah.
that you could do the same thing with just a normal fish out of water character without the isekai element. Like, there are ways to set it up without the specific, get hit by a 18-wheeler truck and reincarnated into another world trope.
It's
I mean, it has
also
its uses, but looking
For me,
at the wider cultural landscape, yeah, it is. I don't think anyone can say that it isn't overused and it isn't tiresome at this point.
well, it's also that again, it seems like fantasy has pretty much been subsumed by isekai in anime right now. But also, unless there's a compelling reason for a lot of the times the character will get to the world that he's reincarnated in or displaced through or whatever, and then immediately play by the rules of that world. Like, there's no attempt to use any sort of knowledge that you have from this world in a fantasy world.
I don't know. I see isekai
Yeah.
stories where an accountant who's good at crunching numbers, dies and becomes like a master wizard in the next one because crunching numbers is good for magic. I also see one where an office worker gets hit by a truck and is reincarnated into like a pizzeria with a half elf wife or something stupid like that.
Isekai is so flooded that right now it's all dependent on the gimmick.
Yeah,
And it's nothing.
It's gimmick instead of fantasy. Even probably one of the better isekais, Konosuba, it's a gimmick. It's kind of a parody. It's a parody of isekai. It's just has more heart and better writing and does it better than what it's parodying.
Isekai is
that
more or
part.
less a genre for the criminally insane at this point. Or not even the criminally insane, the criminally deranged. It's something else. Just scrolling through the titles of Isekai, because the gimmick is in the title. That's how they attract their readership. Is just they have to give it away in the title because there are no book descriptions in Japan.
And yes, Chad,
Yeah, I
my
remember.
calculator is a math magician. He's an extreme mathlete. We're gonna make another one.
Yeah, That's the thing with a lot of the isekai stories that a lot of them should only be two or three books, but they run on for far beyond what the gimmick holds up. Well, if you're writing to a gimmick has a punchline. You have to get at that punchline. Once the punchline's over with, you're done. It isn't time to try to find a new punchline based around it. I will say the one bright spot to me around the entire isekai is what I call the princess improvement genre. Like a lot of things with the anime manga crowd, as the women have gotten more involved in it, it's kind of taken a lot of the rough edges off. But the unique thing that is coming out for female audiences is you have a girl who gets reincarnated, usually gets a bump to the noggin at around 8 years old, realizes with all of her foreign knowledge. She might be trapped in like a role playing game. She might be a princess in some country that's doomed. She realizes that she's the she's basically the evil side character or the annoying side character, and she's doomed. She's doomed. So she'll use so for the next 5-6 years, she's using every scheme in the book to try to keep herself alive, and inadvertently bettering herself, and then bettering the kingdom around her. So to me, that's the one bright spot in this Isekai right now. The male side's pretty much a gimmicks and power fantasy.
Or just really don't like thinking about it, but as a public service announcement, if any of you ever hear about this anime called Mushoku Tensei, do not watch it. Ever. Do not consider watching it. Just do not watch or listen to anything about that show whatsoever. It is evil.
Yeah.
And I do not wish to say any more on that subject.
Fair enough. We'll leave it at that.
Yeah.
Fiona Wolf says, I was reincarnated into a window, a traveler into the East-West RPG Slime World harem. You know, you joke, Fiona, but I'm pretty sure if you throw enough rocks, you're going to hit an actual light novel with that title.
I can think of three or four that she probably used to put that one together.
Yeah. And Fiona Wolf also agrees with me on that. Yeah. I watched it because someone who normally has good taste recommended it, and I am no longer going to watch anything they recommend. Ever.
I do not recommend that. I will say that way too much of Isekai builds off of that, and both the story sense and a lot of the negative and repulsive aspects around it.
Oh yeah, the part that really sticks in my craw is that the main character is utterly irredeemable and has absolutely no self-reflection. There's no point where he looks at the absolute wreckage of his life and decides, that was terrible, I have the chance to do it right this time. And that's a problem with anime as a whole right now.
I mean, Isekai in particular is the distillation of what Hayao Miyazaki was talking about with the problem with the anime industry, right? The whole,
which is
like the weird otaku obsession, subculture, fascinating, whatever you want to call it. That is more or less all distilled into Isekai, where Isekai is like the perfect vehicle for this gamma male fantasy, as Bradford Walker puts it. Like, if you took the Isekai genre as a whole, even with like the baby with bathwater, right, or whatever Isekai you may like, take it as a whole and jettison it into the freaking sun, anime as a whole would get much, much better, I say.
In some ways it would get worse, because you would lose Fushigi Yugi, you'd lose Magic Knight Ray Earth, you'd lose Escaflowne, you'd lose El Hazard, you'd lose
yes, but at what
12 Kingdoms. But
at what
all
point
of those that I mentioned, uniquely enough, were initially aimed at female audiences, and they had heavy female authorship in it. If you look at Isekai now, it is primarily male and it's primarily geared towards male power fantasy. I haven't looked into when it made that switch, but the switch from the female audience to the male audience ruined the genre.
Yeah, I was going to say, like, how old is Escaflowne? Escaflowne is old, right?
Conan the Barbarian is a male power fantasy.
Yeah.
I'm just saying there's nothing wrong with something being a power fantasy. It's just
But it's
poorly
not
written
even.
part of it.
Isekai isn't even a power fantasy. It's a weird, like, harem gamma fantasy. It's not aspirational. It's well, okay. How do I
But
put
once
it?
again, that is at this point that problem's endemic with anime as a whole.
Yeah,
Yeah.
but at the same time, isekai, you can't say that modern isekai as it is today. I'm not talking Escaflowne. I'm not talking Connecticut Yankee and King Arthur's Court. I'm not talking Alice in Wonderland, right? I'm talking the modern
Right.
genre of isekai, right?
Yes.
That were as like some homeless loser or what have you, who has no friends and is loved by no one and has no skills, gets hit by a truck, and in the next world is born a god tier hero with like a massive harem, right? That weird gamma male fantasy that is not an aspirational power fantasy. It is a gamma male fantasy. If you took that and jettisoned it into the sun, we would all be better off for it.
Yeah, that's the
Like the
other thing.
problems
That,
with it are endemic around, but it is. You can't say that it isn't uniquely concentrated in
well,
this
I
genre.
don't know. So I don't know if this is a Japanese culture thing or whatever, but the thing that I've noticed about a lot of isekai is they have some extremely overpowered whatever in their next life. So they're able to instantly go through all of the problems without any difficulty.
Well, that is a little bit about about a standard Portal fantasy. John Carter comes to mind.
Yes, but John Carter still gets captured, but he has to work for it.
But he gets that one. He gets that one thing that sets him aside. Edgar Rice Burroughs did a great job of grounding that in the gravity differential between Mars and Earth. But he had that. He still had that one thing.
Right.
So
The one I'm thinking of is Overlord. Like every single fight in that show gets to the pattern of some big shot in the world that they live in decides to pick a fight, throws out their strongest attack. It does absolutely nothing, and then they get one shot.
yeah, that's a miss. Yeah, okay, that's
The
kind
thing
of
about-
a misapplication of.
The thing about Barsoom versus Isekai, where you see that overpowered element, or that is the gimmick, is that Barsoom was actually, for its time, an original story, and it's actually meant to be a story, not a weird, like, God, I almost can't really articulate it, but Barsoom was actually meant to be a work meant to be consumed, like a story that's read and meant to aspire to, not a story to live out through. That's the difference.
And the problem with that particular type of isekai is that you've got two types of the OP one. There's the overpowered story where the main character is just overpowered, and it's the end of that. And then there's the type of story where that's kind of the gimmick because they seem overpowered, but their problems can't be solved by the overpowered thing. So they have to figure out some other way to get to it.
But at that point, like you said, the whole isekai part is unnecessary. If you took out the reincarnation element, you'd lose nothing, and it would just be a straight fantasy anime. Would be better for it.
Oh, you kind of do get that. I mean, Danmachi. Danmachi comes to mind, or even Slayers. You could possibly do both of those as isekai very easily, but both of them stand alone as adventures in a normal in a fantasy world, basically.
Exactly, and like 90% of isekai would lose nothing if you took out the isekai element. But
Which would
the
leave
isekai
you
element
Exactly.
is marketable.
Well, most of them don't have. Most of them rush through that transition from the familiar to the strange so quick because they're trying to get to what I'm going to generously call the plot. So there's a mechanic there that they're not utilizing well because a lot of the isekai writers are little more than fanfic writers that are doing original stuff as web novels.
Exactly.
Yeah.
They rush through it the first 20 minutes or so and never bring it up again. If you literally take these anime and slice out the first 20 minutes, or the first light novel or what have you, you would lose nothing. You could start the story right there after 20-minute mark, and nothing would change.
So, unsurprisingly, one of the actual decent isekai that also needs to remain isekai to work is Saga of Tanya the Evil, because that one, without the isekai element, then you're just watching a show about a psychopathic 9-year-old.
Well, there's also, with that one, there's kind of the element where said protagonist is aware of the history of World War I and II, and they're sufficiently knowledgeable enough to know that they were born in a losing country, so they're trying to fix that.
I haven't seen
Exactly.
that one. I've
That
heard
one-
good things about it. I'm just. I'll admit this is entirely personal. I'm just too tired of it to even consider watching it, even if I hear it's good.
Too tired of what? Oh, isekai?
Yeah.
I mean,
It's,
it's really more just like Magic World War I.
yeah, the isekai is the excuse to get to alt history of World War I with magic.
Now,
Also,
there,
communists get blown up en masse.
now there is something that I've started to come across that's kind of what I'm going to call an inversion of isekai.
Okay.
It's not the reverse isekai where things come across into our world, and you've kind of got this porous barrier, and people going back and forth, kind of that you see like in the Devil is a Part-Timer or some of the other anime out there. This is more on the literature side. This is kind of on the fringes of the lit RPG genre, but it's starting to notice something called a system fantasy. So it's basically you're real world, and the fantasy world comes to you, often in a violent crash. So it's like you're walking through, the sky splits, and all of a sudden, instead of physics, you're instead of the world working on physics, the world works on D&D systems, and then you have to survive. And that I'm a little uncomfortable with some of the genre because a lot of it's Russian, and a lot of that's got a lot of what they're writing has a real darkness to it. But that system fantasy element of another world imposing itself on your world seems, especially in the light of a lot of the upheavals that have been happening over the last 10 years, has been really interesting but unsettling to watch.
By the way, so Escape Velocity in chat is saying, you guys need to curate works for people that don't have the time or the knowledge, but want to avoid skin suiting and people that hate them. I put a link to Jeffro Johnson's Appendix N in the chat. Read that book. You will learn how everything used to be and what was taken from you. Your birthright, your patrimony, your heritage.
Not only that, but Escape Velocity, inside Jeffro Johnson's Appendix N, you will find what you're looking for, where you will find like a reading list that will last you for a long time of excellent works made by people who don't hate you.
Yeah, the simple answer is don't read anything written before 1980. But anyway.
I took a bunch of
Good
Appendix
luck.
N books with me on my trip this summer, and all of them were great, and only one of them lost some points for stupidity. So,
And make
The
sure it's Jeffro
highly
Johnson's
recommend.
Appendix N.
Well, the other advantage to Appendix N is a fair number of those books are available through like Gutenberg or archive.org. So if you want to sample them to find out what the author's like, you can certainly do that, and then move into buying collections.
Yeah,
And if
actually,
you're fortunate enough to live near a good used bookstore, I picked up most of mine as paperbacks for 50 cents to $1 a book.
but an important point: make sure it is Jeffro Johnson's Appendix N.
Yeah, that's what I
Pub,
linked to.
yeah, Bradford Walker said Old Pub got mad, and they had some schmuck write another book by the name of Appendix N to try and siphon off and cut off Jeffro Johnson at the knees. Do not give him money. He is a schmuck and deserves nothing. Make sure it's Jeffro Johnson's Appendix N. Do not give money to the fake Appendix N.
The difference the difference between the two books is that the new one with the orange garish color is my Appendix N. You don't learn anything from my Appendix N because the entire point of Appendix N is these are the books that influenced Dungeons and Dragons. So there's a lot of good fantasy out there. Like Clark Ashton Smith, good writer, read his stuff, very evocative, but he didn't influence Dungeons and Dragons. Jeffro takes on how did this influence Dungeons and Dragons, and started realizing that a lot of what he was heard, not just from a game mechanic standpoint, but from a cultural standpoint, was wrong. I do think a lot. We've learned a few things since then. One of the things is I'm a big Manly Wade Wellman fan. Up to now, everyone just thought he was. Nobody understood how he fit into the Dungeons and Dragons. Some thought, Jeffro looked at one book from a barbarian. Wellman's known for John the Balladeer, which. Excellent series of mountain magic type books. A lot of weird with that. However, it didn't fit the bard. It doesn't fit the bard. It doesn't fit. And it wasn't until DMR Publishing re-released his Manly Wade Wellman's Cardios books, which was basically a fighting man landing on Atlantis and dealing with the myths of that the community started to understand where Manly Wade Wellman fit in Appendix N. So there's a lot of cool stuff in Jeffro's book, and there's a lot of cool stuff we're still learning.
Well said.
I guess I'll toss in here too that Manly Wade Wellman realized was a huge Captain Marvel writer back in the 40s.
Oh wow!
Yeah,
Marvel goes all the way to the 40s.
Different Marvel.
Yeah, this is the big red cheese. Yeah, Billy Batson.
Although Marvel in one form or another did exist in the pulps and touch science fiction, and is a reason. Yeah, that's. I'll close that can of worms until another time. But I'm not a big fan of Marvel in the pulps, and they paper over that little unfortunate legacy very quickly.
Escape Velocity just purchased Jeffro's Appendix N. Good choice. You'll find a lot of good stuff in there. Very nice, very nice. Let's see. Oh, Bradford Walker asks, Wellman was one of the folks that got screwed by the DC screw job over Fawcett. I can't say I understand it, but I suppose that question's directed at you, fine gents.
Well, it's because Wellman was asked to testify during the second trial. So some of the stuff that he had talked about was used by national publications to effectively win the case.
I've got to beat up a pig now.
That would be the 1953 trial versus the 48 trial.
Clarkson, Texas, 2022 colorized.
Eating up a pig. The trials of every JRPG protagonist, huh?
Well, Mustadio just shot him in the leg.
That's
Ran away.
heroic. That's
Put him out of
so,
his misery.
Dreadnought asks,
Make
what do you guys
sausages.
think? Oh, apologies, go ahead.
I was done.
Oh, okay, sorry about that. So, Dreadnought asks, what do you guys think of Cowboy Bebop, the original anime? I love it.
I hate that we have to qualify it now.
Oh,
We don't.
oh gosh.
We don't.
No, we don't. That's right. Just don't acknowledge the existence of the thing that doesn't exist.
That's only rational.
Yes, but if you don't, you run into the people who've all like
That's
not
a
with Cowboy
self-solving.
Bebop so much, but in other cases with remakes, you run into the people who've only seen the remake, and you have to
But in the
inform
case
them
of
that the
Cowboy
original
Bebop, I
exists.
feel that was
No,
less
you just
successful.
studiously avoid those people.
Yeah.
I-
Like, if you,
do you
At what-
work with people?
No. I am the
Okay,
work.
well, some of us don't have that luxury.
yeah.
Well, stop.
But at the same time, it's like, you could, if you feel the need, you direct them to do, the only one. But at some point, it's like if giving medicine to a dead man. It's kind of pointless.
Let's drop a meteor on the pig.
Ain't no kill like overkill.
Well, depending on the hog in question, that might not be enough.
Oh no.
Well,
Let's see.
to
Is it
answer your
time?
question, I think it's fantastic. I'm a big fan of the musical and visual mood of the whole show.
I think it's safe to say that for many, many people, Cowboy Bebop was their gateway entry into anime, especially for people of my generation who grew up watching Adult Swim at night when their parents, when they told their parents they would be asleep. And it's for good reasons, because it's excellent. Very tight, like only 20-something episodes. It's not like 100+ episode show. No, it's just 20-something episodes, tight story, excellent.
That
Excellent.
was the most metal spell incantation I've ever read in a JRPG. Did you guys catch that? The flare?
Was that first word in script?
Yes.
Inscript a dark god into
Shouldn't that be inscribed?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it should.
I
Okay.
love translation.
Okay, so you've seen Slayers, right?
Yeah. He has a.
Kind of sounds like the entire Dragon Slave type thing to me.
Yeah.
Not having cable, I actually found Cowboy Bebop fairly recently. I saw it for the first time 4 years ago at this point. It was just this big thing that I knew existed in the background of anime history at this mythical status.
Personally, I love Cowboy Bebop, but it's not my favorite Shinichiro Watanabe work. That would have to be Macross Plus, which I recently had the privilege of seeing in theaters, which was awesome. Be jealous.
Yeah, one thing that now again, the music is awesome, and the musical direction, the way they mirrored the the way that they worked the music into the visuals is something you don't even see in Marvel films or any. But one thing, that's back when you could have 26 episodes. That's when you could have time.
Yeah, the industry
Now-
has changed now.
Yeah, what I remember as recently as 2015, 2016, you were getting 26 episode animes.
Well,
What happened?
the thing with the animation and Cowboy Bebop in particular was that they animated. It's the other way around. They didn't integrate the music into the animation. They fit the animation around the music, around Yoko Kanno's music, because she was a very big name at the time, and collaborated a lot with Shinichiro Watanabe. So that was what he did. They animated like to her the music beat that she put. Because yeah, she was the one who's like set the tone and the mood for a lot of it with her music. So that's why you saw that integrated really well in Cowboy Bebop. But as far as the whole 26 episode thing, you still see 26 episode anime now. It's just a lot of them just aren't as good.
Well, they're a lot fewer and far between.
And almost none of them are original now. Most of them are just light novel adaptations.
Well, I mean, I think Escaflowne was supposed to be 39. It got collapsed down to 26. The Gundam, Gundam Wing had a lot more time to develop its stories. I think the original Gundam did have a little bit of the axe taken to it, but it's still over 26. It's just you got a lot more space to tell your story than you do now, and I think that's been to the detriment of anime.
Yeah, the
Personally,
worst casualty of that in Gundam terms has to be Gundam X. It was really going somewhere fun too, and then it just completely went off in left field and dropped the ball in the last act.
I think the biggest loss in the anime industry is the loss of the 3 to 4 episode special OVA, or even the 1 episode OVA, because that's when you had things like not Armor Trooper Votams. What am I thinking of?
I remember that back in college, I had a friend, female friend. Now, you folks at home, get your minds out of the gutter, strictly platonic, but she had one of the biggest, I'm going to say the biggest anime collection of anyone I'd ever met before or since, or at least until that time. Like, entire walls in her room covered with bookshelves with just DVDs, and yes, even then, to date myself, VHS tapes. And we kind of made an informal bet that had started innocently enough with me thinking, hey, I wonder how long it would take me to watch her whole collection. And you're like, I don't know. Let's find out. So it just started in alphabetical order and just started borrowing every tape and DVD she had. And she had a bunch of OAVs. And for those millennials or those Zoomers listening now who don't know what we're talking about, OAVs came out of the Japanese bubble economy when anyone could get a budget from the Yakuza to realize their most paranoid fantasies in ink and paint on cells. And you had this beautiful rainbow, this spectrum, if you will, of East Asian creativity at the head of the bubble economy, like AV students and guys just working out of a closet who could get an OAV series made. And that's where you saw a lot of the splatterpunk stuff. You saw a lot of the borderline hentai ecchi stuff. A lot of the stuff that wound up like in Adult Swim clips later on. You guys know what I'm talking about. Like the Squish Tomato, Galaxy of Terror, Caliber, just Squick. And but one of the series, one of the OV series that I came across through her was 3x3 Eyes, if I'm pronouncing that right. I don't know, 3x, 3 eyes, 3 times 3 eyes, whatever. But that series was great.
The yokai?
Yeah, where the guy is, he's killed, but then he's brought back to life as an undead, as a guardian for, like, this witch from a race with 3 eyes. Not ringing a bell? Look it up.
Yeah. Pi, I think, was the name of the female character.
Oh, that's right. See, I see you two are a man of culture as well.
I'm old Taku. So
Represent. You remember when it was called Japanimation. We remember that.
yep.
We got to keep the flame alive.
My personal favorite OVA or OAV is it's a little ditty. It's only about 45 minutes, made by a famous mechanical designer by the name of Shinji Aramaki. It's called a Meadowskin Panic Maddox 01 MADOX 01. One of the best anime I've ever seen. Period. It's just a story about an experimental suit of power armor, and the pilot for it. Some of the best mechanical animation you will ever see in your life. They don't make it like they used to. You know, that's a mean, but it's true. And it's a shame that you can never really get anything like it again. Because, like Brian said, yeah, OAVs came out in a unique situation, like a unique economic situation. And that does not exist anymore. Animation is too expensive and too labor-intensive to make.
Now that
Spend money on just experiments and maybe not get your money back.
now they do the OAVs as extras for manga.
Yeah, just extra episodes. Or
Well, not just extra episodes. It's they'll put it on disc and bundle it with whatever newest manga book in that series.
well, I mean, usually it's part of a full adaptation. Like, I know, like, a lot of shonen have OVAs and OAVs, but that's just, like, extra episodes in a full series adaptation. But, yeah, you'll just never see standalone OAVs again. You'll never see Gunsmith Cats again, even though that was an adaptation of a manga. You want to talk about your fever streams being made in cell animation with a Yakuza alone. Talk about Gunsmith Cats. It's a 3-episode OVA adapting a manga from a guy who really likes cute girls, he likes guns, and he likes muscle cars. So he basically just made a manga about all three. And then he had it made into a 3-episode standalone anime.
Yeah. Then there's Bean Bandit, which uses one of the characters from that. And
Yeah, that was a good spinoff. I haven't seen
Yeah.
that one yet, but I heard it's good. It has like some things I'll acknowledge aren't like high art storytelling, but if it has things you like and it entertains you, I can't say it's bad. Like, even if you like isekai, right? I don't look down on you for it. It is what it is. Everyone likes what they likes. It's just, it is what it is.
I mean, there are a couple that I look down on people for.
And, okay, fair enough. But you know what I mean. It's Gunsmith Cast isn't high art. It's just a fun story, right? Featuring girls, guns, and muscle cars, especially Mustangs. The guy really liked Mustangs,
Who doesn't?
and I
Well, in
can't look down
particular,
on
the
that.
Shelby.
culture.
That is not just a Mustang, sir. That's a Shelby GT Cobra.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, Mustang. The Shelby GT Cobra, which was spectacular, by the way, and he animated it with loving detail. They really went into detail with how the cars and guns operated.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't he also the story writer for Bubblegum Crisis?
Was he?
I think so. I'd have to go back and check.
Was Bubblegum Crisis a full series or just a OV or a V series?
It was
Just
two,
yeah.
it was two OAV series. Crisis. There's Crisis and Crash.
Oh, okay. Well, see, yeah, a lot of the best anime that people remember now were just OAV series. Even Macross Plus was an OAV series that it condensed into a full movie. Or is it the other way around? I kind of forgot.
It could give us another shot at the conditions for making more OVAs. If any of the early adopter crypto bros suddenly develop an interest in traditional cell animation.
Any of those Zoomer Bitcoin millionaires.
It would be possible, but you'd have to cultivate the not just the skill. You'd have to cultivate an entire knowledge base for that. And unfortunately, a lot of the knowledge for traditional cell animation is gone.
It's coming back, though. Kind of forcefully, but it's coming back. I know Brand Zero, all that. Don't give money to people who hate you, but Disney's having to reinvest into, of all companies, is basically reinvesting and building from the ground back up all that animation knowledge that they traditional animation knowledge that they lost.
Really?
Yeah, it was. It came out of the Mary Poppins Returns when they couldn't do it, when they were scrambling just to try to do things in the same style. But you know, I'm for it in the fact that I really don't like 3D animation, or at least the American style of 3D animation. But you know, the knowledge is coming back because people, you know, people want it. There's a need for it, but at the same time, it's coming back. So it's coming back. You know, a lot of it was lost. So there's going to be a lot of missteps along the way.
You've got Studio Kara over in Japan putting up money for animation contests to try and get the next generation of animators working. Now that they're fat, dumb, and happy from their Ava money.
I mean, animators is one thing, but if we were talking specifically cell animation, that's a little bit different. Cell animation you can't really do in your basement. Like if you look at the behind the scenes of the making of Akira, or even the making of Popeye, you need a lot more than what you can do in your basement to make a cell animation. You know, nowadays you can do it reasonably on your tablet, right? You see single animators on YouTube making stuff on their like a computer tablet, but cell animation isn't going to make a comeback from the fan animator in their basement.
Well, I don't know if that's necessarily the case. There are tools now that are starting to emulate some of that stuff. Even Blender is currently looking like it might be a decent tool. It will take you forever to do it, but the tools are there.
I'm not sure cell animation can ever be not time consuming, even if you try to approximate a facsimile of it. But it is what it is. If it does come back, I'll be happy. Let's see. Oh, let's see. Oh, Escape Velocity said they lost sound for some reason. Is everyone else in chat hearing sound still, or
I'm able to hear it on stream.
Oh, okay. Interesting. Yeah, Escape Velocity. Try refreshing. Yeah, try refreshing the stream. See if that helps on your end.
Okay. So at this point in the show, I'm going to call on some of the folks on the panel who have been rather quiet. Simpreb, are you still with us? Perhaps he went to get a snack.
He's been on mute for a while.
Well, we'll give him a chance here.
Yeah. Let's see.
Yeah, I want to hear from some of the other folks here. CL, how about you? Got any favorite OAVs from back in the day?
Oh, well, my back in the day is not so back in the day, but man, I don't know if does Endless Waltz count if I've only watched the movie version where they spliced all the episodes together?
No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, sure.
I have not seen that many OAVs. I've seen Endless Waltz, which I enjoy. I saw Ixter Girl Zelion, which really needed to be longer. It just kind of happened and was over. It felt like one really long episode split into two parts instead of like two OVA episodes, and maybe that's how they normally go, but I watched that, and I watched what is it? Bao and Rosha. I think the Hirohiko Araki one he did before JoJo, about the guy that's got like the super parasite that gives him all kinds of fantastically bloody ways of eviscerating people.
Wasn't that just
I
called
was-
Parasite?
No.
Like
Bao-
Bayo,
Bao-
Bio, something.
yeah,
Bao.
Bao Rausch or something.
Yeah.
Roaring Alien or something.
Yeah.
I was doing research for my own writing, so I was trying to look up all of the like body horror super soldier OAVs, which I believe Brian you'd recommended 3x3 Eyes when you gave me those recommendations too, but I had not seen that.
Chances are, I'm even more excited to edit your work now. This is gonna be fun.
But one that's on the block to watch when I can find it is the there's an old tokusatsu horror film called Zyram that's basically about
yeah. Go ahead.
a cute dimension hopping bounty hunter who tracks down criminals across space, in this case on Earth, and then establishes a dimension in which she can safely fight him while protecting all of the civilians from collateral damage, except that two electrical line repairmen accidentally get drawn into the zone with her, so they now have to survive and help her defeat the monster. And there's apparently like a 6-episode OVA series that is a prequel to the film.
Iria. That's one. That's one I definitely recommend. Anyone interested in anime, check out.
And I'm almost certain if anyone's familiar with Moonshine Animation's original characters, I'm almost certain that his character Lilia is inspired by that movie, because in the sequel, well, in that film and the sequel, Iria wears this distinctive red jacket and uses a variety of cool guns, and that's basically Lilia's whole character trope is be a bounty hunter, wear a cool red cape, have a lot of cool guns, and violently kill Roblox action figures.
That's by the same guy who did DNA Squared, right?
Not sure.
I keep thinking Iria is made by Shiro Masamune, but I don't think it is.
No.
It just
I'm gonna
feels
look
like
it
one to me.
I gotta look it up now. Nebreb, are you back yet? We're not
Oh,
gonna
and
get.
the Battle
gonna give
Angel
up on
Alita OAV is fun for what it is. It's essentially a really long commercial for the manga, but it's not bad.
And yeah, Tetsuro Amino directed Iria.
And I recommend the Zyram movie to any Toku or old horror fans. It has some pretty good gnarly creature effects.
Did you see the sequel? Sequel? I know there was a second one.
I have not. And I
Fucking
think I watched it on Internet Archive with subtitles, so
Okay, yes. Iria and DNA Squared have the same mangaka, Masakazu Katsura. So yeah, they have the same visual style, but not the same director.
DNA Squared. I haven't heard of that one before. I'll have to look into that one.
You haven't heard of DNA Squared? Oh boy,
I know.
you spring
I-
chicken.
I know. I am. I'm a young blood here.
Ugh. Okay, DNA Squared is about an agent who travels back in time to the mid-90s from a future plagued by rampant overpopulation, where essentially anyone who wants to have a family has to have a license, and they're extremely limited. But they've discovered that the reason for the overpopulation was the appearance of a mutant known as the Mega Playboy, who was so prolific and fertile as to make Genghis Khan blush. And he passed on that gene for hyper-fecundity to all of his progeny. So they believe they've identified who the first Mega Playboy was, and they've sent her back to shoot him with this little syringe, kind of like a tranquilizer dart gun, except it delivers what I essentially think would be an mRNA gene editor that would correct his mutation. But when she gets there... Oh, and by the way, her whole character goal is stated succinctly and wonderfully at the very beginning. Is that she wants a nice husband with a nice house, kids, and a little pet. That's her whole goal. But when she gets there, she finds the dude who is identified as the Mega Playboy is this super awkward wallflower who's horrible with women. And through a series of mix-ups, she ends up accidentally creating him. Like, she turns him into the Mega Playboy by mistake. And then has to correct it.
If this sounds familiar, it's been copied a couple of times since then.
Oh, I'm sure.
That sounds delightful. I will definitely have to look into that.
Oh, yeah, in fact, he was so awkward around women that having to deal with him would make him vomit. So he went from that to just the suavest operator on the planet. Thanks to Karen. Her name is Karen.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Hang on. It says here it's Kadin. It's a little different, right?
Ah, good enough.
That sounds incredible. I will definitely have to look into that. Thank you.
Welcome.
What's the name of that one again?
DNA Squared. Bradford Walker says DNA Squared was a sex comedy that would lay the groundwork for a lot of lame isekai today. I wouldn't call it a sex comedy. I'd call it a romantic comedy. Like, it's not even that ecchi. It's definitely not a hentai. At least not the anime version. Like, it's really more about romance. At least from what I saw.
What was the name of that that isekai about a girl who decides to become the villainess or something?
Oh, Life as a Villainess or something like that?
Yeah, that's one of the Princess Improvement ones.
Life as a Villainess?
Wait, hold on.
I forgot
Bradford,
the precise name.
how is DNA Squared the groundwork for isekai when it's not an isekai? It's a time travel story. It's basically Back to the Future with like more 80s aerobic fashion.
I would say like Escaflowne is more foundation for modern isekai because it's actually an isekai.
I mean, I'm willing to be proven wrong.
There is one. It's long, it's detailed, and goes through some things. It goes through a lot of the more distasteful side of anime, manga, and other things. So,
Well,
I'm glad that I saw. Sorry, go on.
Oh, no, I'm going to let you say that because I'm going to wrap it up here. We're down to like 3 viewers.
I'm glad that I saw Endless Waltz in movie form because, as I understand it, the iconic sequence of Hiro doing the in-flight link-up with the Wing Zero custom while White Reflection blasts through your speakers does not exist in the OVA version because they basically put that sequence in there as the splicing point between 2 episodes.
Ah. Okay, Bradford answers in chat. The issue is that the loser schlub turns into an explicable chick magnet. Was what those... was what those that make Lame Isekai now latched onto the... Okay, so the makers of Lame Isekai now latched onto that plot conceit. Okay, I hear you.
The other one that I can touch on is that you do find in a lot of the male heroes the aversion to being around women. Allergic reactions. It isn't just being timid, and that gets carried forward into a lot of the moe shows, and the moe shows carry that into isekai.
Okay. On that note, I'm going to call it here. I think we've exhausted what we can do in the game tonight. We covered a lot of ground. We introduced the Zodiac Stones, which are going to be hugely important. And the story of the Zodiac Braves and the Lucavi, their demonic arch-foes. And we learned a lot about pulps, and probably too much about isekai and OAVs. Anyway, that'll do it for this week. Make sure to like and subscribe to the channel. Make sure to click the bell icon to let you know when there's a new episode of this Geek Gab series or the main series. And tune in next week. We'll shoot for Tuesday. We were able to do the Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday thing again this time. Now that my schedule's kind of settled down. That's what we'll plan on next time. Hope to see you then. And for Geek Gab, let's do the roll call again. This has been Brian and my panel.
Hardenon Studios.
Catholic Lancer.
Crusader Saracen.
And Paul
Artile.
Archivist. I'm sorry.
And I think Ebreb is still getting like a snack or fell asleep. So, anyway, thanks for tuning in. See you next time. Games and anime are better in retrospect. See ya.